Welcome to another episode of Real Talk. I'm your host, Hannah Hurley, and today we'll be discussing not necessarily a societal issue, but something that does have the capacity to change society: faith. Faith is something that, whether you practice it or not, it surrounds each of us to some extent each day. A Uindy professor and some students have taken that idea a step further this semester by creating a documentary about just that: faith. Today I have students of this documentary class joining me, Colin Jung and Amanda Mumphrey. Thank you both for being here today. How are you guys?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. So it's my understanding that Professor Rick Dunkel created this class brand new this semester. So what about it piqued your interest and made you want to sign up?
I can talk first. I've had Rick in class before, so obviously that was the first interest, is knowing that he's a good professor and knowing that he knows what he's doing in this kind of stuff.
Are you feeling alone in your faith? Uindy Catholic gives you an opportunity.
I was like, okay, making the documentary, Rick's teaching it, sure, I'll sign up for that. And then I was looking through my schedule and I was like, I could have no classes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday or maybe it was just Friday, I don't remember. But I was trying to free up some space in my schedule, and I was like, it's fine, I'll drop the documentary class. I was like, I know how to do interviews, I was under the impression that it was going to be more of a individual instruction class of this is how you do interview shots, and this is how you do research, and this is how you do writing. And I was like, I feel like I have a general understanding of how to do those things on a basic level. So taking a class on the basic level of doing those things, I don't know if that's something I want to be spend my time on in my last semester of school. So I actually dropped the class, and then Rick kind of pulled me aside and was like, hey, why did you drop this class? And I told him, I was like, well, blah, 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 I know how to do most of these things at a basic level. And he's like, you should have talked to me, because that's not at all what this class is going to be. And obviously now, 3 weeks out from premiere time, we're close to completing a full feature-length documentary. So once I learned that that's what the class was going to be, that it was going to be a whole class of 20 to 30 people working together to create this full feature-length documentary, I was like, okay, yeah, no, that is something I want to be involved in. And so I re-signed up for the class, but yeah.
For me, I not only was Rick a big part of it, obviously, because of his history, but I did, when I was looking at the classes offered, I saw it, and I have been in PR for 4 years, 4 whole years of college, and I wanted to do something a little different my last semester, and I'm glad I did, because there are people from all over the school, all over different majors, working together on this documentary.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, and I wish that I had known about it because it sounds really fun. But I'm curious, how did your class decide what subject the film would be? I mean, I'm sure there were several ideas tossed around before you landed on faith. So what did that look like in the decision process?
Yeah, so he really wanted to bring a word, and he put it on the board and asked the class, what do you think of this word? What comes to mind? And what we found with the word faith was that everyone in the class had a different outlook on it, a different perspective. And I think from there, we all kind of knew that's what we wanted to do, because when we looked at that word and everyone was saying 20 different things about what it means to them, the word faith, we said this could be a good way to pull something out of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and it's funny you mentioned a whole bunch of different ideas being tossed around, because in reality, I don't know if you remember the class day, that was the first idea that we had. Rick was like, well, I don't know if you guys have done any thought, because we talked about documentaries just in general for the first few days. We all were our homework assignment was to watch one and then come back and talk about things we liked about it, formatting stuff, just general documentary research. And then after that, we were like, okay, let's figure out what ours is going to be about. And no one really had anything out the gate. No one was like, oh, I have this idea or this idea, a bunch of ideas floating around. Rick was just kind of like, so I had this idea, and I just wanted to see what you guys think of it. And like Amanda said, he kind of just put the word on the board. And from there, everyone was just on board from the first day that it was kind of brought up, where, again, like Amanda said, everyone can have their own take on this. Everyone can have not only their own personal story about it, but every person knows people that have their own personal story about it. So it's something that everyone anywhere can contribute to, and anyone anywhere has a story that they can share. and therefore kind of include in the project. So.
Absolutely. I think that faith is such an interesting topic because, like you said, it's not something that, it doesn't have one definition. It's not something that is the same person to person, and that can really help you grow and learn, not just about the people in your class, but about anyone who you have the conversation with. So it's a pretty good topic. I'm glad you guys settled on that. So walk me through the process of how you began making this documentary. Once you decided the subject and what the topic was going to be, what was the next step look like?
So the next step after deciding the topic was really kind of delegating and assigning positions. So we started, I think it was like a sign up, that we had. So people kind of would put themselves in places where they feel like they would be successful. They would apply almost for positions.
But also places that they feel like they wanted to try more of, because that's something Rick wanted to bring to students that have never been in the studio like me, opportunities where they could play around with stuff like that. So
And I think that's the coolest part of this, is that it is a project and we are creating a, what we see as professional quality full-length documentary, but at the same time it is still a class. And so someone like me who's had a lot of experience in video production is very different from someone like Amanda who's had a lot of experience in PR stuff. Mm-hmm. But both of us being able to dabble in the other's department allows us to still put out good work, but also still learn about things. So it's been cool being able to almost have the class teach each other things. And PR students have been able to teach TV students about things. TV students have been able to teach PR students about things. And again, still having people in those positions where they're going to be most successful. So Amanda obviously heading up PR, that's going to make for a successful PR campaign. And me heading up video, I feel like that's going pretty well. So, but at the same time, again, we're still dabbling so that we can both be successful and still learn at the same time.
That's awesome. I feel like that really is going to breed a really awesome learning and growing environment for you guys, because it's going to make you more well-rounded, which is ultimately what college and university classes are about. So obviously, Amanda, you're in PR, and Colin, you're really familiar with video production. So I assume those are your roles in this. So I want to talk about a little bit more about your responsibilities, Colin.
So I am, I guess, just the director, video director, production director. And my responsibilities are basically heading up any and all shooting that we're doing, which is a lot. We've done shooting all around campus, we've done shooting all around the city. We've even, when the TV crew took a trip to New York, we did some shooting there. So anywhere that we can get footage, that's usually more of our B-roll stuff. To include in just, again, as secondary footage. So I've been in charge of a lot of that stuff. And then for the interviews here that we've been doing actually in the studio, I know you were talking about like next steps. After we were picking that topic, the video crew and I took a day to get together to kind of set up a consistent look for what our interviews were going to be, because we wanted as many of them as possible to be in a consistent location, so you get that consistent feeling of this is all for this. It's not these assorted interviews that are all scattered throughout. It's all very it's prepped and it's researched and it's consistent. So I was in charge of helping set up that set, getting all our cameras set up every time we have interviews, which has honestly pretty much been every time we've had class. So 3 times a week we've got at least 1 or 2 people coming up to studio to get interviews done. But yeah, and then obviously there's different stages of production as well. So in the pre-production stage, I was heading up a lot of the roadmap stuff to figure out what our story was going to be. Because at the end of the day, a documentary, when you're actually going out, I know we can talk more about this later, but when you're going out and shooting a documentary, it's all pieces, it's all fragments. And at the end, you have to take all those fragments and figure out how am I going to put this together into a cohesive unit, a story, something that has a start, a middle, and an end. And so now that we're kind of finishing up that production phase and we're moving into post-production, that's kind of what the challenge is now, and what my main focus is now is figuring out how we're going to put those pieces together and how we're going to form that into a product that can be something tangible.
Well, I've seen your work before, and you're very creative, and you're really good at what you do. So your classmates are lucky to have you. But Amanda, talk me through some of the PR and campaigning and marketing that you're doing.
Yeah, so a lot of it you might not see it, and it really works a lot of behind the scenes, I feel like, but then you do see it a lot of post-production. So a lot of what Colin was talking about were the interviews. So PR team was really responsible for that. We actually had to decide what messaging we were going to use to reach out to these interviewees. We had to also decide who we were going to reach out to. A lot of that was people on campus, because we have such a big, diverse campus. We knew we could talk to a lot of people, but also people outside of campus. Who are we going to reach out to? How are we going to reach out to them? So a lot of that was like email templates, we sent them out, and then again we would schedule the interviews, send them up here, and then we would do the interview. A lot of it was also the questioning that went along with it, because you have to be very specific about the questions you want to ask during that interview, because we don't want a specific answer, but the goal of this documentary was to find commonalities between the word faith. So we needed to structure that messaging in order to get those answers. And then post-production, we are doing a lot of flyers and designing material. We are also reaching out to the people we interviewed, letting them know, hey, here's the premiere date. I also just sent a press release over to the Reflector so they could help promote our material or promote our documentary, and I actually have an interview later with someone to talk a little bit more about it. So yeah, just doing things like that, a lot of promotion, a lot of connecting with people and finding that right messaging is really what the PR team has done.
That's awesome, and obviously with your background in PR, I mean, just as Colin is really experienced in video production, I know you have great experience as well. So that's really great. You guys mentioned a lot about research and what goes into the interviews, the questions that you ask. I'm curious what you looked for and how you're going about finding those commonalities.
Yeah, I mean, like Amanda said, I think it's a lot in the structuring of the questions, making sure that we're going to be asking questions that are going to be giving us somewhat consistent answers, or at least answers that are going to be usable together, I guess, in that sense. So we've been talking a lot with people about their testimonies, their personal experiences with faith. One of the big questions that I knew I wanted to ask right from the beginning is, how do you differentiate between faith and religion? Because I think that in a basic understanding of those two things, people might lump them together, but a lot of people, which again, I think everyone has experience with faith, whether it's a religious faith or a personal faith or spiritual faith, whatever it is, I think that everyone has experience in some kind of faith. But I think that differentiation between the two is very important, and the distinction to make is very important, because they are different. At least in my perspective, those are two very different things, and I knew that was a question I wanted to ask right from the beginning. Was what is the difference to you, whatever person we're interviewing, between faith and religion? So, and it's been cool to hear, because I think another angle that we're kind of focusing on is the fact that faith is a unifying thing. While religion can be a divisive thing and religion can cause conflict, not that religion is inherently bad, but at the end of the day, a religion in its existence is basically just a set of rules. Without faith, a religion, that's all it is. And so when there are rules that are different from other people's rules, it's going to cause conflict naturally. But then, as we've taken deeper looks at things and we've asked people these same questions, it's been really cool to see, again, like Amanda said, not trying to force any answers upon people. We've had very open-ended and general questions, but as we've asked people these questions that are, again, very open-ended, we've seen a lot of similar answers in regards to faith and what it means to people, how they perceive it, how it affects their life. And that's been really cool to see that, what we believed from the beginning, that faith is something that's unifying and everyone experiences it, and it affects their life in a strong way. That is something that's a universal kind of truth.
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. And faith and religion, as you said, they're not always interchangeable terms. They can have completely different meanings. And I think getting to the bottom of that is so important and so fascinating. Amanda, is there any question that you came in hoping to get an answer to that maybe you wanted to implement into the interviews as well?
Yeah, there actually one question I thought of in the very beginning that I don't think ended up being used, but I feel like people answered it naturally. I wanted to know, is faith can everyone come together, like with a common faith? Are we able to come together for the greater good? And I feel like that might have been a too pushy of a question. I don't think we asked it in many interviews, but what we found throughout is that people were saying, yeah, like faith makes me a better person, it drives me to do better things. So if everyone's saying that, then yeah, I feel like we definitely could come together for a greater good. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I said, this is fascinating. I want to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about some of the growth and the learning that you guys have had throughout this process. So stick with us here.
Are you feeling alone in your faith? Uindy Catholic gives you an opportunity to get involved in a religious community on campus, providing sacramental needs and fellowship for prospective students and giving you a sense of belonging.
We just want you guys to know that God loves you, He delights in you, and He's in awe of you, and we would love to meet you. So you should come on out.
Uindy Catholic, a community for you.
For children who may have high-functioning autism, may have ADHD, processing challenges, working memory issues, sensory integration issues, those types of challenges. It's a place where human beings are valued, children are respected. It's a progressive school that takes a hands-on approach to education.
All right, Jake, who you got? Tennessee, Georgia.
Georgia, easily, man.
Come on, Tennessee's 8.5-point dogs. Easiest spread of all time.
How?
Because they're good, and Georgia's played nobody.
At least Georgia has a defense.
Oh, come on. You're an IU fan. Your opinion doesn't matter.
My opinion doesn't matter. The only thing you know as a Purdue fan is how to lose to a 15 seed in the March Madness tournament.
We're bowl eligible, my guy. Are you? Make sure to tune in to Last Call Monday nights. We'll talk about Division I football, give you plenty of UND sports, some interviews in there as well, and then plenty of pro sports, whether it be NFL, MLB, the whole shebang.
Yeah, and there's at least one guy that knows what he's talking about.
Thanks for sticking back with us here. So before we went to the break, we left off with, lots of growing and learning in this process. So I want to really get into kind of like where your guys' personal stance on all of this starts. Amanda, where was your thoughts on faith and, even religion, if you wanted to get into that? Where is your stance now compared to then?
I honestly, personally, my mom is she took a lot of religion classes in college, and so I actually grew up being very open to all different kinds of religions and faith. So I never associated faith with religion personally. So when I listened to everyone's answers, it really, and not trying to say I was right, but it did kind of confirm some of my beliefs. Like, yeah, everyone has a different understanding and different perspective of it, and it not always is religion. Like me, some faith can drive people differently. So I think that was, and then so my opinions didn't change too much, but it did show me how different everyone's answers are and how crazy it is. Yeah,
for sure.
And I think before I get into my personal kind of faith stance, I guess, I think that's a great point to make because, we even did, like specifically talking about one interview we did with a Muslim priest. We talked with him, and he actually didn't grow up in the Muslim faith. He was someone who found it later in life. And so his answer towards the end of his interview, like he said, I've got one more thing to say, and that's just that whoever you are, wherever you are, as you are just like learning about religion, learning about faith, looking into all these things, doing the research, find the answer that makes the most sense to you and go with that. Like don't follow an answer because you think it sounds right or someone else tells you it's right. Like find the answer that makes the most sense in your brain and go with that. So I think it's cool to hear that, that's been the finding. That's been so consistent. But talking specifically about my own stance, I think that I wouldn't say I've necessarily like changed my stance. I think similar to what Amanda said, I think I've had some things like confirmed in my brain. And again, it's been cool to see as we set out to try and find unity and community in the whole faith thing and talking about how it can be something that brings people together. It doesn't have to be something that's divisive. It's been cool to hear people give very similar answers or very similarly worded answers so that we can hear things. So me personally, I am a Christian, and I've been a Christian my whole life. I've had ups and downs in how strong I've been practicing my faith, but what's been really cool is that the past year or so has been a very big upswing in how strongly I'm practicing my faith. And so then to be able to go into this project feeling like it's something that I am making a big part of my life. I'm making a big effort to make faith a big part of my life. And then to be able to talk to other people about their faith has been a really cool thing. And honestly, hearing all these different testimonies and all these different stories about, what have I believed, what have I not believed, all those things. As someone who grew up in a Christian household my whole life, hearing people with similar stories to that, I've noticed that obviously sometimes people would say the more like powerful testimonies are the ones that have these big dramatic change, or the people that, didn't grow up in faith and found it later in life, or they grew up in faith and then dropped out and had this whole big dramatic kind of change in their life. It's interesting to note that, something I've noticed is that hearing those stories, it's not always the biggest change that happens in people's lives that makes them stronger or weaker in their faith, but honestly, it is just asking yourself those questions. So I know a lot of people sometimes will have those doubts about faith and have questions and all these things, but something I've really noticed recently, especially within myself, of like, okay, what is it that I believe? I don't know unless I ask myself. And so, there'll be times where we're interviewing. I remember interviewing one of the people in the class, and I asked him a question, and he said, "That's a really good question. I haven't thought of that before." Yeah. And not that that's a bad thing, but I think it's really cool to be able to ask people questions about their faith, because it helps them learn about their own faith. Even if they, I could go into a room and say I'm Christian, but then as someone started asking me questions about my faith and how it impacts my life, and if it's not a question I've thought before, then I might not know how to answer that question. Right. And that challenges me in my faith. And maybe I think about it and eventually come up with an answer for the question, then I'm stronger in my faith. But either way, having those questions, having those challenges in what is it that I believe, why is it that I believe that, that's a really important thing to kind of work through. And so that's why it's also just been such a cool thing to ask those questions to people so that they can have those challenges, but also to have those questions asked.
And you see it in their eyes when you ask them. It just changes them. I think the biggest goal from this documentary was to show people that it is okay and it's important to ask questions, because that's how you get to the bottom of it. That's how you get to the bottom of something.
Absolutely. I think that is so important, and I think you guys are doing really important work. I think a lot of it has to do with the attitude of how you come into it too. You know what I mean? So I think for a long time, religion, and as you were saying earlier, religion and faith, a lot of people think, coincide with each other. And of course they can, but it's not always the case. So I think a lot of times, these conversations can be kind of taboo. So when you can leave your ego and your mistrust of other people at the door and really open yourself to having these topics, there's a lot of room for growth. And I know you said that unity, finding those similarities within people has been really important. Would you say you guys have found that throughout this process?
Absolutely. I mean, I think honestly, after every interview I've had, people leave almost less stressed than they came in. And I think that's good because they're done with the interview, right? But also they're thinking, oh my gosh, all these questions, either I just answered them for myself, or I know I need to go back and ask myself these questions more. And they all have been excited to see it. So I think, there is that unity factor. And I think that is the same emotion we're trying to provoke with when we show the filming, is we want people to leave with almost this weight lifted off their shoulder that, hey, there's not going to be a one definition thing, but just know that these commonalities can bring us together.
Yeah. And in a society where things are so split and divisive all the time, it's nice to be reminded that we're more similar than we think we are.
Exactly.
Yeah. So obviously we're nearing the end of this semester, and that's really exciting because I know we're all seniors sitting here, so that's really exciting for us, but it's also a little bit stressful. So where are you guys now in the documentary process? Are you nearing the end? What does that look like?
Yeah, nearing the end because, mainly because we have to be. But no, yeah. So I know PR is kind of working on event planning and working on getting our premiere event up and ready. All the food reservations.
Like the posters are going to be hung up this week. Just getting it known.
Yeah, we've got class later today, so hopefully that's a productive day today. But yeah, and then as for the production side of things, editing will start today or Friday. If we are, probably Friday, but yeah, so we've got a few more little pieces to shoot, but for the most part, we're pretty much wrapped shooting. We've got, again, a few little pieces to collect here and there, but we're at the point now where we kind of need to start piecing everything together. That way, if we need to do reshoots or we have pieces that we're missing, in our narrative, we can go out and fill those. But yeah, we're really at that place now where we have pretty much everything we need. We have a really, it's general, but we have a good idea of what our roadmap is going to be for the story. Again, having that really important to have that beginning, middle, and end, so that it's not just a whole bunch of pieces thrown together for an hour and a half. But yeah, so we're in the editing process where we're kind of fitting our sound bites to our roadmap. We're scrubbing through the interviews, which I'm sure will take a lot of time, but it'll be worth it in the end because I think we've got a lot of good interviews. I know I haven't even sat in on all of them, and I know we have some really, really good interviews that we've had. So it'll just be taking those pieces and putting them where they need to go, and really filling out what is going to be, I think, an awesome narrative.
Yeah. So you say we are scrubbing through these interviews and all of that. So do you have a team of people? Like, is it split up for some people are PR and marketing and some people are video production? And what are those other kinds of little niche areas?
Yeah, so we're the heads of each of our departments. So we do kind of have like a little team with us, which they're doing just as much as us, honestly. But yeah, they're all great. And we each kind of delegate tasks to each other, like, hey, you do this, you do that, and I'm sure Colin's doing the same thing, like, hey, you edit this, you add that in, all that kind of stuff. So, yep, it's a team effort, absolutely.
Yeah, and we're all, like Amanda said, she and I are both heads of our department. There's one other department head, Stephen Pagel, is our research team lead, so he's been heading up a lot of that. But no, it's been cool because not only do we have teams within the class itself, but we've had unique and differently staffed teams within each phase of the process. So, pre-production, production, and post-production, there were different teams within each. So someone who was in, the video team during production might be in the PR team during post-production, again, trying to get that people in different positions so that they can learn still. So it's something that's been really cool, again, to just, not only share people, I guess, but also
see us all work together and get this done.
Work together, because it's been, as video head, it's been really nice to not have to worry about scheduling the interviews. I can walk into the studio when we have class and set up the cameras and know that
someone's going to walk
research team or PR team is going to be, they're going to have someone for us to interview, and they've been working really well. So I don't think there's ever been a day where we set up cameras and we're like, oh, we don't have an interview scheduled today. They've been really on top of it with everything. So
exactly.
And then, like Amanda said as well, delegating. It's been nice to be able to have people, just step up and be like, what can I do? What can I do to help? Just right at the forefront of getting things done.
Yeah,
so.
And there comes that theme of unity once again, getting things done. Okay, so, as we wrap up here in the last couple of minutes, you've obviously pitched a very good, preview for what the documentary will be, but if you could just leave the viewers with one thing of why you should go see this film, why is it important, what would you say?
That's a good question.
It will leave you questioning in a good way, It won't leave you with nothing. It's going to leave you with something that you're going to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I need to ask myself these questions. And I think that's really powerful, honestly.
Yeah. I would say that we've done a really good job of getting a diversity of interviews. And so, honestly, like Amanda said, I think everyone, no matter who you are, will be able to sit down and watch this documentary and find something in there, some piece of themselves in there that they're able to point to and say, that's me, or that's been me, or that will be me, or something like that. Every single person will be able to, kind of have that moment where they're left, they've grown or they've questioned something, again, like Amanda said, in a good way, but something that they're able to take with them and move forward in their life in a new way. Again, whether it's a task or something to ask themselves about, or whether it's new information or whatever it is. But I think everyone can take something from this and grow from it.
Yeah. So tell me really quick, where and when will this premiere? How can we see it?
The premiere is May 2nd, and it's in Uindy Hall.
It's in Uindy Hall.
8 p.m.?
8 p.m., yes, 8 p.m. I wish we would have looked at that really quick because we just got LP approved. But yes, there will be posters all around. There will be emails sent out. A lot of promotion coming up to that point, and it will be on the LP event.
Well, good. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me, Colin Jung and Amanda Mumphrey. This has been another episode of Real Talk. I'm Hannah Hurley.